so hopefully you have somewhat of an idea of, hopefully you watch the other videos and get an idea of how things work. With this one, so this is probably the easiest of your options to do the digital illustration, or at least it takes, I don't want to say at least amount of skill, but you're not going to be able to, you're not going to have to be able to draw in order to complete this, okay? So what we're going to do is, you can do this one of two ways, but you can either use, come on, the brush tool, like so, and then you can adjust the settings here under brushes and brush settings, okay? So you can adjust the different settings here. You can change the tip shape here for it, or you can choose these different brushes here to work with, okay? So you can use the brush tool, although actually this would, some of these are not brushed, they're like liquid brush and stuff. But anyways, you can use the brush tool, and you can do it like this, where you would just basically, let me put these on. You would, you have a background image, and this is the closest thing I could find to that I had of a picture of a cone. You can see he's orange and he's got that white stripe. I like white stripes. I don't know if you're that band, but and then I just put a layer above it. What we're going to do is that this is going to be our sample layer, and we're going to paint on this layer. So with a regular brush, all you would do is just hold Alt, because I can just sample real quick. So let's say I want to brush this guy. I'll hold Alt. I click on this. That will now become, okay, it's kind of pinkish. I did not expect that. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. That'll now become my brush, and then I can basically draw with it, and then hold Alt and click, and then draw with it, hold Alt and click, and then draw with it, Alt and click, 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 Alt and click. Now, if you do something like this, you can see my brush is not very unique. So I would really, nail down what you want to do for a brush. So like this looks kind of boring, but you can do something like that. So kind of like I was saying before. Let's go back to the brush settings window. Brush settings. Do like a more interesting tip like this. And then that way when you would go to do this, it'd be more unique looking kind of a thing. So, and that way when I go like this, it's more different. This looks a little crummy, okay? I don't suggest doing it that way, but that is one way if you want to have more control, or you want to try and explore and paint it more manually. That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is, and this is kind of the way I would suggest, is to use the liquid brush. So go to here, the mixer brush. And then what you're going to want to do is, again, have a layer above, have that one underneath. And then on this, you remember before you can load or clean the brush, right? So loading the brush will load the color onto the brush. I can clean the brush, and you'll see now when I go to try and brush, well, I have heavy mix. Hang on a second. If I do dry, and then we'll clean the brush, you'll see it's not going to do anything because it's not mixing with anything. It's not doing whatever. Especially if I turn this off. Oh, come on. Okay. Or I can load the brush, which will load the color in there, and then you can see I can draw the thing in there. Okay, so that's what this does. But what we're going to do is we're going to sample, just like I did earlier. I'm going to sample a spot like this, but by default, yours is going to be on load solid color. So when you go like this, when I go to brush it on, there it goes. And let me see, this is load, and I'm going to leave, I don't want to clean the brush. So this will load the brush after each stroke, and this one will clean the brush. But I'm going to leave it like that. So if you do that, what's going to happen is it's just going to draw a solid color, which is okay. You can do it that way if you want. So like, for instance, again, I'm just going to keep using my little dude here as an example. I'm going to hold Alt and paint, and then Alt and paint. And actually, instead of doing, let's not do that. I would also choose to do wet heavy mix. So Alt and paint, and then Alt and paint, Alt and paint, like so. But what would be even better than doing it that way is to actually, on this, choose not to do that. So now what you're going to see when I hold Alt and I click on it, it's actually going to load the image as the what's being on the brush itself, and it'll add a little more variation to it than just having it by default. Now, if I'm using this liquid brush, I highly suggest go to the window brush settings, And then try to find something that's, you know, interesting and not just a generic-y, crappy look. So I'll grab, let's say this one, take my spacing down a bit, like so, and then we'll do that. That's fine. Yeah. So then I'm just going to go ahead and hold Alt, and I'll do a little bit of brushy brush, and then Alt and brushy brush, Alt and brushy brush, Alt and brushy brush, Alt, and I'll kind of go Alt, and I'll go like this, Alt, this Alt, like this, and like for this area in here, I can kind of grab that, and because you're sampling the picture underneath, it'll actually use the image itself. If you do the solid color thing, it won't necessarily use the image. It'll just be a solid color, which might be the look that you want. But this is a little bit easier, obviously. So I could kind of, you know, go like, I want to make it like this, and I have a lot more control. Okay. Make sure sample all layers is on as well, because what that'll do is it'll make sure if you don't have that on, it won't necessarily sample what's underneath it, and then you'll be kind of stuck. And then what will happen is, let me just finish this so you get an idea. Just gonna so let me just kind of what'll happen is when you're done and you do the whole painting, what I want you to do is just turn the layer off underneath, and then you'll have just what you painted. And then if you want to, like, you know, do more with it on its own, you can kind of go like this and, you know, further, you know, make it look a little bit more special. But this might, for some of you, I think this might be a good avenue to experiment with, because you can get a nice little, you can see it looks like a painting, right? And so try playing around with the brush settings as much as you can, and that should hopefully make it more visually interesting. I would say with this type of method of working that the like, you can't do a portrait of somebody because you see it gets real blurry. I mean, maybe you can try, but generally, like, landscapes and that sort of thing are better for this, because even this is a little bit too detailed, because you can kind of tell it's a fish, but it's not the greatest. This isn't obviously my preferred method, but it might be for some of you. Okay. Yeah, that's really all there is to this one. So if you choose to do this, you can do it, but I don't make it really crappy. When you're done with it, I don't want this picture in it. It should just be yours. I don't want to see any of the other stuff. All right. Do a lot to try and you know, do interesting things with it. Like, so for instance, you could, you know, you can get a variety of looks here. So I could take, like, you know, this and take the scattering up like that, and then when I go to do the stuff, second, let me look at the layer underneath. See, I didn't sample any of it. Come on. Well, I could take this, right, and you can see this is pretty different looking than what you saw a second ago. And you can try mixing around and using different brushes. This one obviously has a little bit less control. But try playing around with the look. Don't just do, like, the first thing that's easy and what have you, right? So try to experiment with it and see what kind of interesting looks you can get with your painting, right? So this has got, like, a weird kind of dry, scratchy brush thing going on. Yeah, so that's it. All right, so good luck.